So hopefully you guys are all here for Comments in the Classroom. If not, you're in the wrong building. So I am Nikki Ogden. We haven't met yet. I see most familiar faces. So I know there's some people who are already teaching graphic novels on campus right now. Does anyone use these already in their classrooms? Okay. Which is great. Fabulous, because then you guys won't get bored and make me flip through the first few slides. So I am a huge convert of graphic novels in the classroom. I actually came to them kind of late. I was never one of the kids who, read them from the start, who, couldn't get enough of them. I didn't even start reading them to my late 20s. So I had ended up needing surgery on my knee once more. I was laid out for 3 months, and my sister bought me a series of graphic novels. And I opened them, I was like, oh, how sweet, what are these? Okay, a little skeptical. What I didn't realize is she had bought me one of the graphic novels, in the canon, top graphic novels of all time. It's called The Sandman series by Neil Gaiman. So even in my drug-addled state, I was flipping through going this is amazing. And then, of course, when I finally got off the painkillers and finished the 10-volume series, I was like, wow, this is awesome. But that was kind of it. I didn't go out and read any more graphic novels. I was like, that was a good story, kind of content. And then when I got into library school and I was working on, I had some awful class I had to take. It was cataloging and mark record coding, just as dry and boring as you could get. I was like, I need something to jazz up the semester. I need something a little fun. And they had a graphic novels in the classroom kind of class. And I was like, that's going to be a cakewalk. It'll be fun. I'll sign up. It was not a cakewalk at all, but it was definitely fascinating. I worked my butt off, and it was such a good class. I was a total convert after that, and now it's something I'm super passionate about and totally push as much as I can. So I have the fervor of a convert. So it's never too late to get involved in graphic novels. You don't have to have loved them from the start. You don't have to attend Comic-Con to think they're the greatest thing ever. But I do want a chance to kind of tell you a little bit why I think they're great and give you some examples of how you can use them in your own classroom. So Stacy, I'm going to call you out since you actually use these already. If there's anything that we're going through and it sparks an idea in your head, or you want to share some of your own experiences, jump on in. Same thing, if anyone has any questions or any comments or their own experiences, feel free to just kind of dive on in there and talk with us. So I'm going to give kind of a brief overview of why I think they're amazing and why I think they're so good in the classroom. And then we're going to talk into some specific how-tos of introducing them, some ideas. Because I'm trying to cover all the departments, we are going to go more for breadth rather than depth. But what I'm hoping is you guys will be interested enough to kind of look into this further and try some and maybe get a few ideas of ways you could introduce this in your own classroom. And then obviously put you in touch with the resources you need to make that successful. So I just want to say right off the bat, if we're talking about some of this and you sounds interesting but you're not quite sure, I want to let you guys know I am totally willing to partner with all of you guys on this. If you think, I'm not sure how to get this going, let's get together on Collaboration Day. I will help you find the graphic novels that you can use, and then I'll work with you to kind of come up with some assignments and ways to integrate it. So just keep that in mind if you're considering it but not really sure how to go with it. So there's a lot of reasons I think that these can be successful in the classroom. Obviously, you shouldn't use graphic novels for every single lesson you teach. That definitely fit different lessons better than others. But it is just another tool to have in your tool belt, another teaching strategy, another way to engage students and reach out to them. And it's definitely a fun way to get them involved in a topic. So graphic novels are interesting in a way they help struggling readers, but they also engage those high-end students at the same time. So you can use them to help explain difficult concepts, to scaffold meaning. At the same time, there's actually a lot of cognitive complexity in interpreting a graphic novel that we're going to go into. It appeals to multiple learning styles. We definitely have a visual culture that we're moving to, and this kind of goes hand in hand with that. They're fun to engage in, which is one of the best reasons to do this. This is, like I said, it has all that sort of educational reasons why, like I said, there's cognitive complexity to it. At the same time, they're just really, really fun. Students love graphic novels. One of the studies I was reading of a teacher who has a whole unit on graphic novels, she was saying with the graphic novels, students don't just pretend to read them, they actually read them. They get engaged, they get involved in it. And if you ever come in the library during any of the breaks, this section of the library is just packed. There are kids all over the floor, leaning against the shelves, standing room only. It's the highest circulating area, so this is definitely an area of interest. So, I'm a total nerd, and I think taking apart something and seeing how it works is a lot of fun. I understand not everyone's that way, so I'm not gonna, I could happily talk for like the entire day of like, okay, these are the different elements of the graphic novel, and this is how it works. I'm not gonna put you guys through that, but I do wanna touch on some very important parts of it that kind of help understand how it does the things it does. And also, if you find it interesting, this is a fabulous book that you guys I highly encourage to read that talks about all the elements of graphic novels and kind of goes a little bit more into it. So, can everyone see this little picture over here? It was a lot bigger on my gigantic library screen, but. So, if you can see the picture, can someone tell me what has happened? What is the story of that picture? When you get to the end of the panel. Someone died. We have a scary guy holding an axe saying, "Now you die," a very scared looking man going, "No, no." And the very end, the last picture, we have just a cityscape with like a shout going off. The space in between those two panels is called the gutter. And it's actually a very, very important part of the graphic novel because that's where the meaning and the storyline actually takes place. So what we have, again, two pictures, a guy holding an axe and a cityscape, that's all. But we were the ones who created the story, that created the narrative. And that act of creation is called closure in the graphic novel. So Scott McCloud, who wrote that book, he calls the reader the silent accomplice in a graphic novel. So he says, the guy with the axe didn't kill that man. Us. We did it. We, the reader, are the ones who made that happen. That's a really important concept in the graphic novel because it means that the reader is a maker of meaning. It's the reader who is creating the story, creating the narrative, and making things happen. And in order to do that, you have to be willing to really engage and put yourself in a story. Reading a graphic novel is not a passive experience at all. It's an active experience that you have to get inside, put yourself in, and create this narrative. And he has a very wonderful chapter that he goes into depth talking all about that. And I highly recommend reading it. But it's just a fascinating idea. And like I said, graphic novels, I think there's a sort of this thought that it's kid stuff. That it's, when you're young, you read picture books with a little bit of words. And as you get older, you get more words and less pictures until you finally graduate to adult books that have no pictures and just words. So there's this idea that putting pictures in books is sort of infantilizes them. It's just for kids. That is not the case. There's actually a lot of stuff that's going on and high-level thinking that gets involved. So there's a couple of different literacies working together that you have to do when you read a graphic novel. You have sort of the interpretation of the picture. Like, if you're in an art class and you have a painting right in front of you and you have to interpret that. You also have the words that actually occur in a graphic novel, but then you actually have this whole language of symbols. So I have this picture here. We have a plate and it has all these squiggly lines rising up from that. What do those mean? Heat. Yeah, it's heat. The next panel over, same little plate with the squiggly lines, but now we have squiggly lines over the guy's head. What does that mean? Exact same squiggly lines over the man.
Thinking.
What was that?
Thinking.
Thinking. That could be one of it. Anger. Heat. Heat now put on a person. We usually think of as, hot under the collar, angry. So the interesting thing is there's multiple ways to interpret it, which actually makes it very interesting for discussion in classrooms. Students can take it in a different way, and you can have a whole discussion on why did we take the interpretation we did. But learning to understand these is a language. It's an actual sort of thing you have to learn. If you see, someone like this in like a comic book and there's lines streaming behind them, that means movement. It means, fast. If we have a hand up like this and there's little waves right here, it means that someone is like waving their hand in movement. So really they're just lines. That's all they are. If I just put that line up there on the board, everyone, we'd get, super out of the ether trying to interpret what it was. But we take our context from everything else in the story. So we have these words, symbols, and pictures all working together, and that's what helps scaffold the meaning for students and for adults. So it helps struggling readers because if you are maybe a little weak in one of those areas, you have two other languages to depend on to help give you the context for what's happening, and you could sort of figure it out and sort of be a little detective, like what's going on in this passage. If you are really fluent in all three of those languages and you know how to interpret them, it actually adds to the complexity of the story. So that's how it works with like the low-end students and the high-end at the same time. So we have this way of giving support to the actual meaning, At the same time that if you understand all of those, you get more out of a graphic novel. So I have a couple just other samples of the way we can interpret symbols. So here I have the exact same picture, the exact same words here on the left, but we interpret them differently. We first have just a very straightforward, I don't think so. The middle passage, we have the crazy jagged lines and we have it in bold. It makes us think someone's mad, someone's yelling, I don't think so, kind of upset. Over here, really small font, very tiny. It sounds like the guy is maybe like scared, a little intimidated, like, I don't think so, like very unsure of himself. Exact same photo, exact same words, different ways of portraying, just the font and the word bubble creates a completely different meaning. And this is a language that's learned over time. One of the interesting things though is when students read graphic novels, they just don't get better at reading other graphic novels, they actually become better readers overall. There's this tons of studies that have been done, and if you're interested in seeing them, let me know, I'll pass them on to you. But just tons of studies that show that reading graphic novels improves literacy overall, and it improves comprehension overall. Some of the most recent ones show that readers of graphic novels have a better understanding of verb tenses than other students who don't. And then the countries that have the highest rates of literacy also have like mainstream acceptance of graphic novels in their culture. So like Finland and Japan have thriving graphic novel cultures, and they have some of the highest literacy rates, which I think is fascinating. So I have a short little clip from Scott McCloud talking about why we should even worry. Okay, we know what graphic novels, sort of how they do stuff, but why should we even care?
A canvas. It's by Daniel Merlin Goodbreed.
It's from one of his TED Talks.
Why is this important? I think this is important because media, all media, provide us a window back into our world. Now, it could be that motion pictures and eventually virtual reality or something equivalent to it, some sort of immersive display, is going to provide us with our most efficient escape from the world that we're in. That's why most people turn to storytelling, is to escape. But media provides us with a window back into the world that we live in. And when media evolve so that the identity of the media becomes increasingly unique, because what you're looking at is you're looking at comics cubed, you're looking at comics that are more comics-like than they've ever been before. When that happens, you provide people with multiple ways of re-entering the world through different windows, and when you do that, it allows them to triangulate the world that they live in and see its shape. And that's why I think this is important. One of many reasons, but I gotta go now. Thank you for having me.
I just love that description of, being able to triangulate the world. It's a window back. So when you're using these in the classroom, yes, they're silly pictures sometimes. Yes, it's a comic, which isn't really recognized in our culture, but it is a way for students to reflect back on, here's something described in this graphic novel, and we can use it as a lens to look at our own world and the world around us, which is, I think, just fascinating. So I want to give you guys some ideas, practical things that you can take back to the classroom. And like I said, Stacy, feel free to chime in if anything that's really worked well in your classroom. And like I said, I want to try to hit up a lot of different departments. So if you want me to go into specifics on any idea, go ahead and stop me and let me know. So there's a couple ways that these are usually used in the classroom. The most common way is that supporting sort of difficult concepts for students to understand. So the standard sort of example is a Romeo and Juliet graphic novel. So maybe you have one particular student who's really struggling with Shakespeare, the language is over his head, he's just not getting it. You can have them read the graphic novel, and they, just like you would show a video in your class to kind of aid and just a different media type to teach, you can use the graphic novels to support these difficult concepts to help understanding. It's a different way for the student to take it in. It doesn't replace the actual text that you're using, but it's an assistance. And you don't have to use the whole book. If your whole class, say, is having issues with a passage from Romeo and Juliet, like one particular scene in Midsummer's Night Dream always confuses them, you can, just scan it to your computer, have the spread of the pages up on your projector, and discuss it as a class. The great thing about graphic novels is they take hardly any time to read. You could read an entire graphic novel easily in an hour, so you actually could have the whole class read one together, and then talk about it in a discussion. English is not the only one. I have this great graphic novel called Economics. Anyone teaches economics? Where it talks about specific ways of describing concepts in economics that might be difficult. So if one of your students isn't getting the invisible hand, or they don't understand like supply and demand concepts, this is just another way to sort of demonstrate it. And again, because our students are very involved in the visual world, these stick in your head really well. You have not only just the, okay, I had the person explaining it to me, my teacher talked about it, they demonstrated it, but I also have this great like snapshot graphic image to keep in my brain. For science, Darwin's Origin of the Species has actually been made into a graphic novel that I swear it's going to show up like as soon as I make this presentation. I kept checking the shipping status every day, but it's not here quite yet. So I actually have failed many times to read Origin of the Species, but if you're having sort of a talk on evolution in maybe one of your biology classes and you just want to help students understand, you could do like, here is the original and just a short passage from it, talking it, and then here's the graphic novel to help us better understand. So the students who are really struggling with those difficult concepts, it's a great way to kind of, again, scaffold meaning and make things a little bit more attainable. One of the great things that graphic novels do, too, is they totally humanize a lesson. So they put that human face on it. Most of them have a narrator of some sort. So in like a social studies class, we see it most commonly, where you'll have a narrator who's a character in a time of history. And they're nonfiction books. There's a ton of nonfiction graphic novels right now in our library. So, there's some on the desk. We have some on the Dust Bowl. There's one for every single war. There's one on 9/11, across the board. But because you have that narrator, and also remember, the reader has to get involved in the story. They have to be involved in creating the meaning of what's going on with their interpretation. It puts them in, and once you get like that human face on an incident, it helps make it more personalized, more interesting, more willing to get involved. I have a couple examples you could use in like a health class. If you guys are studying different health issues, or in biology, I know there's a project someone does about genetic disorders. You can actually have them read. We have a couple. We have this one called Epileptic, which is actually, it's an international one. I can't remember the original language it's in. But Epileptic, there's Diabetes in Me on there. I got one called Pedro and Me that's about HIV. These can actually be used as a class text. Everyone could read it together and kind of discuss how you saw the disease, how it affected the characters' lives in it, and then you could have students be in charge of making their own sort of graphic novel on whatever genetic disease that they're responsible for. They pick one and then they have to team up and make their own graphic novel. That's an informational one. I did find one for math. Logic Comics is actually a very well-known math graphic novel, and it's actually told through the biography. It's like a biography of Bertrand Russell and his pursuit to logically prove the concepts of math. And that's as far as I got in the explanation before it was over my head. But the thing that was crazy to me is it's actually used to teach like a reading strategies class. They use these. My students have a whole bunch of lessons planned. So like struggling readers use this book. So it has kind of some complicated math, rules that for me were a little difficult. But apparently it's very accessible when you're actually reading it, which I thought was interesting. So there's one, like I said, I just have a couple examples up there, so there's a lot of possibilities. One thing that I thought was cool, does anyone have the book Relish on it? Oh, should I hold that one up? Yeah, so Relish, this is really fun. This is a book that examines like the cultural context of food. It's a memoir, but it's actually each chapter is sort of framed by a recipe. So there's a full recipe with sort of like a graphic, like this is how you put it together, but then it talks about the important role food has played in this person's life. And I thought, oh my gosh, how great for a culinary class to read that together as a group, and then they have to, as an assignment, pick, some sort of, recipe that's played a role in their life that's like, struck a chord, and it's like their own little memoir that they have to then create. So another great way that these all work together is creating text sets and inquiry centers. So I know we do 1984 here at the school. One of these books has a really great whole chapter about a lesson plan for pairing 1984 with V for Vendetta in the classroom. I know a lot of people have hopefully seen that movie, so you know what I'm talking about. The Dust Bowl. This one won a bunch of awards and was on this list. I was thinking, oh, this is great. We could do a text set with either, you know, The Great Gatsby, not Great Gatsby, The Grapes of Wrath, or we could do, you know, with social studies is teaching a lesson on the Great Depression. This is great. You could just select a few. You don't have to have the whole book, but you could select at maybe an inquiry center if you're using haiku. You could select, you know, just some passages that how did the Dust Bowl start. So I was thinking, oh, this is great. This book is awesome. I could already like find 2 departments to use it. But as I was flipping through it, the whole like first page is explaining like plate tectonics and how the Great Depression or the Dust Bowl happened in terms of plate tectonics. And it was like this great spread. And I was like, oh my gosh, how cool would this be for like a science class? Like students like see this example of maybe one of the you know, the laws of nature or like, you know, physics, and then they have to create their own in pairs. So like, you know, you guys explain to us the rules of like friction or leverage, and they have to create their own, and that could, if everyone in the class does it with a different one, it could be like a study guide for the entire class, because it's a short, quick way to remember. You can sort of visualize the picture in your head and be like, okay, this is how it works. So there's a lot of possibilities, and there's a lot of ones that kind of surprise you too with, like I said, science was not on my radar when I was flipping through the Dust Bowl, but as soon as I turned that page, I was like, oh, inspiration. I do have some wackier ideas out there. Like, again, I was trying to think of science. How can we incorporate this in science classes? And I was thinking, okay, origin story of Spider-Man. Peter Parker's bit by a radioactive spider. Your job as a student is to recreate like the lab setup of which, if you wanted to make your own Spider-Man, what tools would you need? Describe the whole lab setup, like, you know, maybe draw a picture of what it would look like, and, you know, tell us what tools would have to happen. Or if you're doing a genetics thing, you can do something really similar. Like, okay, describe to me like the genetic process that would have to happen for this to become real, and what technology are we missing? Like what gaps don't exist anymore? So you can get kind of out there with it. That was one of my wackier ideas. But there's a lot of options that can use this for inspiration, and it's a fun way to frame different assignments. So I want to just go over some general concepts. Obviously, I mentioned making your own graphic novel a couple times. Obviously, this goes perfectly in an art class. I mean, graphic novels fit art classes more so even than they do English classes. And there's a great essay in one of the books I'm going to show you guys that talks about how to do like an art history lesson, just focusing on graphic novels, starting at like Egyptian murals and like rugs and tapestries all the way to the present. But obviously not everyone is an artist. Me making a graphic novel would have a lot of stick figures, which is totally acceptable. That is an image and it totally works in the classroom. But there are some cool tools out there you guys can adapt. So this is one of them called Make Believe Comics, and it's an easy way for students to make sort of a comic strip, and it's printable, or you can take a screenshot and they can email it to you. But the site has some great ways. So I could just select a character, and then I could change the way the character looks for whatever I want. And I just double click, it goes up there. I could add a top balloon. That one works for me. And then write it here. So as you guys can see, the suggestion says write in the language of your choice. This is a really great program for the World Language Department. So if you're working on, say your lesson is to conjugate a certain verb that week, and that's what your students are trying to do. They could create a comic strip for you where they have to use, 3 different verb tenses of that word. Or they have to do, 3 different ways that it can be done. They also, this site has like a section called 21 ways, to introduce it in your classroom. So not only can you use it for language, but current events it's great for. If you want students to have like a political comment on maybe some sort of issue that's going on in the world currently, they could use this software as well. And just kind of come up with something. So it has a lot of potential, and like I said, for the students who are not really good artists on their own, it has a lot of support. It's a quick way, and of course, you can also have like a writing assignment, like why did you select the things that you did? Like describe to me, since maybe if you're not in an art class, you aren't grading on the quality of art, you still want them to be accountable for the things they put in, so maybe they have to write a paragraph explaining why they made the choices they did. And that's going to really show you their understanding of the elements. Like, I thought it was really important to put in this when I made it because it totally demonstrates this concept that we talked about in class.
Nikki, I'm sorry, what was the site?
It's called Make Believe, but it's spelled kind of weird. Let me go back to the...
Sorry.
And I can send this out to everybody.
Okay.
So make believes, so it's not, it's spelled weird, comics.com. But I can send out the links. And then this one was too cool not to show you guys. So this is more of a science class thing, but the periodic table of comic books. So we have the entire periodic table, and if you click on an element, it has a bunch of passages from times that that element has centered or been focused on in a comic. So I just clicked on oxygen, and here we have all these different options of scanned pages where it's come into play. And we have this whole little comic about him talking about the actual atom of oxygen. And I thought this could be a great assignment too, where students have to pick an element from the periodic table and create their own sort of, these are the properties of this element. This isn't in its inert state, and you could get a little creative and clever with it at the same time, which is kind of fun. So that is just cool. So I just wanted to kind of show you guys what's out there. So like I said, a lot of what we're talking about is not only reading the graphic novels, but interacting and creating your own is always a huge part of it.